Welcome to the LeaderCast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is give a review wherever you listen. Today's guest is Erica Dhawan. She is a keynote speaker and a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. Her latest book is called Digital Body Language, and that means I was paranoid through the whole interview that I was doing the right thing with my face and my hands. I promise you, in the world we live in now, this particular interview is going to give you a ton of great advice on how to operate in a digital world. Check it out. Erica Dhawan, welcome to the LeaderCast podcast. We are so glad that you're here. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you. I was telling someone right before this, I have my normal everyday meetings and making decisions as a leader myself. And then these podcasts get put in the middle of my day. And I sort of sometimes I just want therapy. I'm like, I'm like, just
need a break from the Zoom burnout, from the email exhaustion.
Right. All that stuff.
Reset. So I think that's what we're going to do.
I'm just saying tempted. I'm just like, Erica, just fix me. Just tell me what to do.
Oh, you look perfect. It's so funny. After I wrote a book called Digital Body Language, anytime people get on a Zoom call with me, they start to get nervous that I'm judging them. And here's the truth. It's about being authentic and being yourself, but in a new way.
I love it. I was going to bring that up. We'll talk about it way more. The two, they're combined, but the two most uncomfortable conversations I have with anyone are body language and eye contact. Because then I get in my head about what we're talking about, and all I can think about is making eye contact the whole time.
Right.
But we'll get there. So you said a little bit, I know you're an author and a speaker and lots of other things. I want to go back and hear how you got here. But for those who don't know, what do you do these days? What are you excited about and what's your work?
Yeah, well, I'm a researcher, an author, an expert on 21st century teamwork, collaboration, and innovation. My life's work is really to help up-level leadership frameworks from a 20th century era to a 21st century global world. My first book was moving us from what we all knew of as emotional intelligence to what I call connectional intelligence. It's called Get Big Things Done. And my latest book moved us from traditional body language to what we all now know of as digital body language, the new cues and signals in our modern day hybrid world. But really, I think more than ever, I'm passionate about helping people reimagine what human connection looks like today, and that each and every one of us have a voice and ideas that actually can be shared more deeply, more powerfully if we use the tools at our disposal well. I
love it. We'll save plenty of time for some great advice around that stuff for sure, because I know I need it. But before we do that, I love to do this. Take me back on our time machine to little Erica, and where'd you grow up? What were you into? What kind of kid were you? And one of my favorite questions is, were there any stories that really gravitated or grabbed a hold of your heart early on? But tell us what you were like as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a very shy and introverted girl. My parents were Indian immigrants to the United States, and we grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So at home, we spoke Hindi, which meant when I got to school, I had accented English. I was the shyest, most nervous kid in the class. Raising my hand, calling attention to myself was unimaginable to me. Pretty much in every report card from kindergarten through 12th grade, every teacher said, Erica's great and studious, but I wish she spoke up more in class.
Right.
It's almost like I wasn't in the room.
Yeah.
But one of the ways I learned to find my voice over time, to connect with people, was mastering how to decipher other people's body language and become an observer of language more than a speaker of the language.
Yeah.
I would watch the popular girls with their heads high. I would study the cool kids slouching during school assemblies. And it taught me very young, it's not what we say, it's how we say it. That really is tone and intonation, especially almost like a foreigner in the American world. And in many ways, I think that fast forward, just like I was an immigrant to traditional body language as a kid, I think I was able to clearly see that we're all immigrants now to the new world. I call it digital body language.
Right.
That there are shared languages that we have to learn together as we continue to evolve. Additionally, I think some of the most the memories I had as a kid were, one of them was one of my passions as a kid was Bollywood dance, because it was from my culture. And, it was a place where I used movement actually to connect with anyone. It allowed me to feel comfortable when I was nervous and I couldn't say the right things. And it really taught me early on that when it comes to human connection, it's not just about shaking hands or being in a room. It's about connecting people in new shared experiences. It's about using not just your mind, but your body. And today, actually, in keynote speeches, from around the world to virtually, I've actually used and infused Bollywood dance into my keynotes where I have people stand up and learn a move. And I can't tell you how much it changes the energy of the room. It teaches people to step out of their box of sitting in a seat to learn. And it reminds us all that, leading is about being in that uncomfortable zone. And that when we're dancing together, it breaks down the ice. Whether you're the CEO or the new hire, it doesn't matter. You're part of the group. And I think the last story I think that I'd like to share as a child that really shaped me is I remember in middle school, we were reading from George Orwell's Animal Farm. And
it's my favorite leadership
book. We were all reading a page out loud. Yeah. And I remember I had to read a page and one of the words was peculiar on that page, but I had never heard it before. My parents didn't have fancy English at home. And I said, peculiar. And I got made fun of by the bullying classmates for an entire year and for that. And I think it really taught me, first it taught me you got to let go of these things, right? And, but it also, it helped me actually learn how much accents and dynamics are really about intonation and tone and how crucial body language is in shaping expectations and impressions. And I think in many ways that fast forward 40 years, I still think that my journey in teaching people how to communicate and connect better comes from my own pain and suffering of having that dead fish handshake, of, being shy as a kid and being made fun of for saying peculiar instead of peculiar.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I would have guessed. We actually have a ton in common in a weird way. I was not a Bollywood dancer. But
you can do it though. I'll teach you one day.
All right, let's. My wife and I took swing dancing lessons when that was a thing in the 90s, and I already forgot. But that's the only dance I could do for a minute. She just flipped around me. But a couple things I was thinking is, so for me it was improv comedy, and I am also an introvert, and my whole life I've had what the roles that people assume are for extroverts, and you as well. I know, like keynote speaking or performing or comedy. But it is often the introverts have plenty of time to watch other people, and it's not that we don't like to talk. We kind of choose our moments, is what I've noticed with introverts. Do you still self-identify as introvert, or do you think that was kind of a phase as a kid?
It's a great question. I think I was forced to be trained to be an extrovert, and I had this subconscious belief that if I didn't act like an extrovert, I wouldn't be successful in business. And I think the last, especially 5 years, I've had to rewind that limited belief and unlock my inner introvert. And again, introversion to extroversion is not about, is specifically about where you get energy from, right? And I think, again, I'm still an introvert, although most people would probably assume I'm an extrovert.
Yeah. The other parallel is eighth grade. My eighth grade year was my worst year ever. I got bullied like crazy. I just moved from Kentucky, kind of a small town in Kentucky, to Columbus, Ohio, which felt to me like New York City, which is huge. And and I had an accent and talked like this, and people made fun of me, and I had to learn to talk. This is going to age me, but I would watch Tom Brokaw at night as a 12-year-old and try to lose that accent because people prejudged me as not as smart or whatever. And so many other guests on here went through, some very, very intense trauma, but some sort of like early kind of bullying or isolation. that drew them in. And do you feel like that's a huge part of your desire for connection today? Were those early experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, as a kid, all I wanted to do was fit in
Yeah.
because I constantly felt like an outsider. I was, not speaking the right language. When I was in the US, growing up, my friends' moms would ask, "Where are you from?" And I would say, "Oh, we live down the street." And then they'd say, "Where are you really from?"
Yeah. Yeah, right,
And
right.
then when I went to India, my cousins, would treat me like a foreigner in India because which cousin is named Erica
Right.
in India? I was the American named cousin.
Right.
And so I think because of this deep longing for connection and belonging, I all I wanted to do was fit in. And I thought at that age, fitting in was about following the rules, following external paths of success.
Yeah.
Saying all the right things versus what I actually think. And that led me on a path in my 20s where I got 3 Ivy League degrees. I went to Harvard, MIT, UPenn. I worked on Wall Street at Lehman Brothers during the crash. I worked there through the crash, and I won competitive job opportunities. I learned how to be externally successful, and it was really when I was on the trading floor when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt that I hit my own. I'll call it at that point a young crisis moment
Sure.
of what is really success to me. And I had been following all the external paths of success versus asking myself. And that's when I really stepped into my first true inner journey. And in that inner journey, I discovered so much of what I cared about was not what teams do, but how teams work. And that actually leads to greatness. And I remembered some of the amazing moments when I was a kid, when I was on teams. I started women's leadership conference when I was a senior in high school. Funny enough, I speak at lots of leadership conferences now, but it was in me already. The passion was there when I was, 17 years old.
Yeah.
And so those moments where I felt like I had failed, like I was, on a bankrupt trading floor, that really taught me to look inside myself versus looking at others.
I love those moments, and I think about this all the time. People, this is on audio and video, but most people listen to it in their commute or whatever. And someone's listening thinking, I'm not on the trading floor as I'm going bankrupt right now.
Yeah.
But I'm a few weeks from from just feeling like this isn't working. Like all this stuff I had worked for just isn't doing it for me. And you just said like one sentence like that was the moment that sort of turned you around. But could we camp out there for just a second? Like what was that moment really like? And what's your advice to folks when they feel that moment sort of coming up? Because it's scary. I've been there too. Yeah.
Well, it was stark. So it wasn't the day we went bankrupt. It was actually 3 months later, Barclays Capital, the firm had bought Lehman Brothers. And, I'm at the trading floor at 6 a.m., and one day, got into the office. We had a team meeting, and it was maybe 6:30 in the morning. I hadn't had breakfast. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was just on autopilot trying to prove. And I was feeling so dizzy. I was sitting down in a seat and I was incredibly dizzy. So I left the meeting, which was a big faux pas.
Yeah.
And I went and sat down at my desk. And within about 60 seconds, apparently, of me sitting down at my desk, I fall and faint and hit my head to the ground. And I get a nosebleed. And I'm by myself because everyone's still in the meeting. And people come back after and they see me completely fainted on the ground. And it was really that moment, I think, after I'd fallen to the ground, right? That I said, okay, what's really going on here? I am not listening to my body at all.
Yeah.
And I think that really led me on a journey of the importance of intuition, right? I started Bollywood dancing again. I started remembering that creative acts actually give you that wisdom. I started thinking about what do I really want to do versus the path that I've been following because it was externally successful to whoever I was in front of at that time.
Well, I'm glad you're okay after you fell.
Yes.
But
yes.
I would say, like, if you were writing the movie script of your life, that's such a dead-on metaphor, isn't it?
Yeah.
to just
Yeah.
like pass out. It's just like
Pass
you were
out.
done. You were done.
Out.
Yeah.
And it just reminds us all, we've had hints. We all have hints of those about to pass out moments.
Right.
And we have a choice. We have a choice to ignore them, and keep
Yeah.
going and then run the hamster wheel race and fall at some point, or start to listen
Yeah.
and create healthy habits. I mean, leadership at the end of the day, I think, is about discipline and habits.
Yeah.
And to know, when to stop just as much as when to start or keep going.
Yeah. Well, let's get caught up, I guess, a little in your career from the moment you're such a visual image. I've got you laying on the ground at your desk, and then today. So let's fill in that gap. What
Basically the last almost 20 years. So after that, I completely left. I quit. Wall Street. I went back to do my graduate work at Harvard and MIT, where I stayed on as a researcher at Harvard's Kennedy School, focused on really looking at what does leadership look like in a 21st century world. I was studying under some of the greatest experts from, the 1990s, like Peter Senge, if you've heard of him, or Ronald Heifetz from Adaptive Leadership. And, in many ways, I saw brilliant, primarily all white men in their 60s leading the force around leadership methodology and thinking. And I loved it. And I was teaching with them and learning from them. But in many ways, I kept asking, what does this look like for my generation? Sort of I'm on the edge of the Gen X and millennial. Where they think global first, not local. I'm the same age as Mark Zuckerberg. I was on the onset of the social media revolution. And, in many ways, work has completely changed. And, it completely changed a lot more in the last few years. But I always, I really wanted to ask, what are those leadership skills for this global, virtual, multi-generational matrix world? And that really led me on the journey and passion to develop a body of work and look at, what we knew of as emotional intelligence in the 90s needed to be upgraded for a world where we couldn't just rely on body language cues. Given we work on Zoom and email and, in a global team environment. From there, really, after launching my first book, Get Big Things Done, and starting my speaking career, realizing that we didn't just need new language and new best practices around what collaboration looks like. There's also a whole level of language that's changing. The body of our language was changing, where my favorite example of this was I was working with a coaching client. Her name was Kelsey. She was an executive at a healthcare company, and she got some feedback that her empathy was weak. And so the first thing I did was look for all of the markers of subpar empathy and inability to ask great questions, to listen, to use good body language. Turns out when she was in a room with her team, she was brilliant at all these things. She was thoughtful, she was engaging. But while her traditional body language was wonderful, her digital body language was abysmal. She would send brief, low context text messages saying, "Where is this now?" with 3 question marks, freaking out her team. She would chronically cancel meetings at the last minute. She would multitask on video calls. And it really, helped me understand that there's a whole new way of showing empathy, a whole new way of building trust and respect in the modern world. And the cues and signals of leadership look different now. And that's what really led me to write my book, Digital Body Language, as well. And let me say, I sold that book in 2018, well before the pandemic. So fast forward, the pandemic hits. And as the person who wrote the article in Harvard Business Review in 2018 called How to Collaborate Effectively When Your Team is Remote, and then it going viral, it was the most shared article in March of 2020. It created a launching pad where my work is really about understanding that innovation comes from anywhere, and it's about designing an organization where you can collaborate anytime, anywhere, across any distance. And that theme became really center of point in the pandemic. And now in a world of hybrid and remote work is the norm, where leaders of every industry have been forced to understand that this is a critical skill set
Yeah.
to compete.
You're a prophet. You saw it coming.
I think what I saw is what I saw from my lens,
Yeah.
right? It was already coming. It just was fast tracked.
It came fast. That's true for a lot of things.
Yeah.
I wonder, when you said that, I will confess I ordered your book today. I'm excited to read it. I just assumed you wrote it in 2020 because of the title. So and now I'm in my own head. I should have looked, but thinking about you writing it before, it just makes me wonder, is now that we've
and it came out in 2021, so I updated it for the pandemic.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, if there were, because I haven't read it yet. Is there any? What were those updates? I guess what it almost is like you had a theory and then it was immediately happened, and I'm just curious, where were you right and where were you wrong in terms of what?
So I think it just became more pronounced, and I would say it wasn't even a theory. It was, I had done research, with companies like Cisco looking at WebEx data and who's up on video calls and who doesn't. I looked at, emails on Teams and how different email tone and subject lines impact relationships, and the design of meetings and how that impacted who got heard and who didn't. And so what I think what was different was pre-pandemic, I thought the digital body language was a complement to traditional body language. That traditional body language is the main piece: handshakes, head nods, lean-ins. That's how we build trust.
Yeah.
But we also, and this was true before the pandemic, up to 70% of our communication is virtual or hybrid. We are emailing, we are conference calling, we are digitally communicating with our colleagues on the same floor in the same office. Sales roles, digital communication with customers, global teams, primarily digital communication besides those quarterly or annually in-person meetings. So this was already a really important skill for many of those larger organizations. What I really discovered through the pandemic is how much digital body language was not just a complement to traditional body language, it was now informing traditional body language. It was driving the changes we had in body language cues. So for example, through the pandemic, we've seen people, after being on email and Zoom and Slack for the last 3 years, data is showing individuals tend to feel more impatient. They want you to get to the point quicker. They tend to think in bullet points and speak almost in how we write emails. Looking down at your phones and screens in an in-person meeting is much more common. Now in hybrid work, we're looking at those on the hybrid call, and in person. So the cues of even eye contact look different. And so I think that's one thing where digital body language is actually informing some of the norms and cues around traditional body language. I think another thing that I discovered is how, especially through the pandemic and now it continues, is how digital body language is really an enabler of more inclusivity than in-person meetings. And I'll share a few things related to this. First, simple things like, I've seen leaders who used to run team meetings in their office. There was rarely an agenda. Extroverts took up most of the airtime. Now they send an agenda 2 days before with questions they want everyone to be ready to answer. At the beginning of the Zoom meeting, everyone shares their answers to those questions in the chat tool or on a virtual whiteboard. And then the leader calls on those with the most different or diverse ideas. And this one leader told me he has heard more from his introverts and junior colleagues using this format in a way that he had never heard from them in the in-person office. First of all, that thoughtful agenda allowed introverts to be ready to share. They had time to digest their ideas, to be ready. Second, by getting everyone to write their ideas first, instead of turn taking, junior team members felt like their ideas mattered just as much. And research shows that the first 3 people that speak in an in-person meeting and virtual tend to be the most senior people. So again, and tend to take up most of 80% of the airtime. So again, thinking about how to get more diversity of engagement, even simple things like, instead of having 30 people in a meeting where only 6 people talk, have a segment of 10 minutes of breakout rooms on a video call where people can connect with those that they may not talk to. In person, we tend to sit with who we know, who we like, and who we look like. And even in a virtual setting, we have more interaction. So these are, I think, inclusivity and how digital has informed traditional body language are things that have surprised me as they become a norm, not an exception.
Going back to kind of the introvert thing. So I would say I had one video meeting a month in 2019.
Yeah.
And I probably have five a day now, probably.
Remember Skype? It was like this one-off thing that we used.
Or
it's almost like voicemail now. Nobody, you don't use Skype. Yeah. We don't really. Some of us use voicemail still, but I'll talk about that later.
Well, I hated FaceTime because I didn't like the gaze. I didn't like in person. Yeah. Like it's a little like if we were talking in person and I looked over there, that doesn't feel rude, but on Zoom it kind of does. And I feel like this pressure. Ironically, I was a film and TV actor for many years, but I feel like this pressure of the camera on me all the time. It's like a microscope on our face. Yes. And I guess any thoughts on that? Just internally, how we process just even seeing our own face. That's new, right? Now I can actually see what I look like when I talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I describe this as sort of the notion of video body language, mm-hmm. right? I think that's really what it is, because I define digital body language almost as all of the new cues and signals that have replaced the handshake, the head nod, the lean in, which include not just how we show up on Zoom, but also your choice of communication, meaning your tone, your response time, whether you use emojis or not, your subject line, all of these nuances, how you run the video meeting. But let me give you some tips that I've seen that have made a big difference when it comes to video presence, which I say is almost like the new executive presence.
Okay.
First and foremost, when you are presenting on a video call, it's really powerful to look into the camera. Research shows we make eye contact 30 to 60% of the time in person. I'd argue on a video call, if you're presenting, you want to be making eye contact about 60% of the time. There's actually a really cool company where there's a camera you can put in the middle of your screen and it's perfect eye-to-eye contact.
Yeah.
So even looking at some of those things that will allow you to be more natural can make a big difference. Secondly, make sure you've bought a webcam and ring light. Again, presence matters. And make sure you're far away enough from the camera where people can see your face, but also some of your facial expressions as well. It does give people more context. I think another thing is, the third one is, reduce the thumbnail. Don't look at yourself. Obviously look at yourself if you're about to present, but really try to minimize it when you can. It's usually not very helpful. It's distraction. It's a distraction. There was actually one study out of Wharton that showed when two people have high trust, it's better to have a phone call instead of a video call, because you're more focused on listening to the tone and intonation in someone's voice, and you're less focused on how you look on camera.
Interesting.
So it's just an example of, sort of new cues of when also to be on video and when it doesn't matter, or it may not be important. Again, I do think that we're kind of like, I was an immigrant to America, learning a new language. We are immigrants to this world of Zoom and Slack and email, constant ring, dings, vibrations, and this is our new world.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that there are different accents and dialects that people have. I always say there's a skew. There are people that are digital natives, and there are those that are digital adapters. And a digital native is someone who really is thriving in this often virtual first environment. Text, I am. They often hate voicemails and phone calls out of the blue. Quick tip. On the other end are digital adapters who feel, this is new. They have much still reluctance to it. They want to be in person. They often have an inconsistent use of each channel. And the best example I can give of this is, I'm a native and my father's an adapter. And when he sends me a text message, it starts with Dear Erica and ends with Love Dad. And I have to scroll through it because it's as long as a letter. But it's just an example to show, just like being immigrants in different parts of a country with different ways of speaking the language, we're all working to build a shared language together now. But it's going to require us to get comfortable being uncomfortable, to acknowledge differences.
Yeah.
And as leaders, not asking everyone to revert back to the way we did it 3 years ago, and really ask what will drive performance, growth, and innovation now.
Well, my main comment to that is that's very sweet of your dad, actually.
Yeah,
What a nice
it is.
dad. In my life, my dad texts me, how do I make my cable remote work? And then I text my kids and ask them, and then they say, Dad, nobody has cable anymore. So it's just a vicious cycle. Nobody knows what's going on anymore. But living that, I love that. What were the phrases used again? Like a native.
And digital native. So
Yeah.
are you more of a digital body language native?
Yeah.
You sort of grew up with these cues and signals.
Like my kids.
Maybe
Yeah.
someone who was using instant messaging in high school,
Right.
or are you more of a digital adapter?
Yeah.
Where, digital communication really came on onset in your work or professional life.
Yeah. This was Erica. I could talk to you all day, but you did not sign up for that. Thank you so much for your time. If folks want to get your books, book you as a speaker, whatever they want, what should they do?
Well, first off, thank you so much. Lovely LeaderCast and everything you're doing. Check me out at ericadhawan.com. Book me for a speaking engagement, or check out my books, Digital Body Language and Get Big Things Done. I also have a free gift right now. I created a hybrid work toolkit with best practices for hybrid work. And you can download it for free at hybridtoolkit.com.
That's awesome. And we'll put that link under the podcast where folks can grab
sign
that.
up on LinkedIn and Instagram if you're a social media user to get daily tips.
My last question for you.
Yeah.
You're using hand motions like you would in real life. Yeah. And I wonder if most folks do it actually under the camera, I noticed.
Yeah.
But have you purposely trained yourself as a digital communicator to raise your hands up when you're making?
Great question. I think it's been natural because I'm on video calls all day long. But I think it helps.
Yeah.
I do think, many people asked me, why do people wave at the end of Zoom meetings? It's so weird. And I've sort of said it's because we, similar to a preschool teacher who's teaching preschoolers how to say hello and goodbye, you have to use multiple cues because they don't know how to speak yet, or they're learning how to speak. We are limited in our cues on Zoom. So we are, using hand gestures or different cues can actually help bring that and create that shared context that we normally would have had in person.
Erica, this has been awesome.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you next time. We'll make sure you're back on the LeaderCast platform. Thanks so much for being a part of this.